means everything to me. And I'll be okay admiring from afar, 'cause even when she's next to me, we could not be more far apart. And she tastes like birthday cake and story time and fall. But to her, I taste of nothing at all. And she smells like lemongrass and sleep. She tastes like apple juice and peach. Or you would find her in a Polaroid picture. And she means everything to me. Yes, she.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here tonight. Before we get started, we wanted to go over some privacy stuff. So here is a non-exhaustive list of possible tips. Number one, watch us on YouTube. Watch our panel on YouTube at a later time when we upload the recording there. Subtitles will be included. Number two, headphones or earphones. If you want to make this event extra special, try using headphones or earphones so that you can get the full experience. Number three, just hear us out. Dim the lighting on your device to the lowest setting possible, rest your eyes for a bit, and just listen. Number four, a special space for you. We'll be here for a bit, so try finding a comfortable spot where you can best enjoy the event. We'll give you about 1 minute or so to do anything and everything you may need to do, then we will begin. Okay, that was about a minute or so. So we will now be moving into our main virtual celebration. Chriselle, take it away.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to South Bay LGBTQ Center's National Coming Out Day, a virtual celebration. My name is Chriselle. I use the pronouns he, him, and his, and I will be one of your co-hosts and co-moderators for this evening. We celebrate today in order to honor all generations of people who have begun, will begin, or have unfortunately passed during their coming out journeys. Whether you are here to support a friend or a loved one, to honor someone's memory, or even start your own coming out journey, thanks for being here. Your presence alone is beyond powerful. We do want to acknowledge that everyone's coming out journeys are unique and that we're not experts on how to come out. Not all of us are ready to come out for personal and or safety reasons, and that is 100% okay. We just hope that the stories and experiences shared tonight can help bring some perspective and understanding that an entire community and culture is here with you wherever you go. Juan?
Hola a todos, my name is Juan. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I will also be one of your co-hosts and co-moderators for tonight's event. We would like to thank everyone who helped make this event possible, including our volunteer panelists, our volunteer event planners, my co-host slash co-moderator, Garcelle, and a special thank you to Zoom for allowing us to use their webinar program. And
Awesome. As we're getting ready to get started, I wanted to give you all a trigger warning for tonight's event. We'll be discussing and sharing personal experiences with our coming out processes. Again, we will also be uploading this a video recording of our event onto YouTube with a more concise list of those potential triggers. So if you'd like to check out the panel then and hop off right now so that you have that space to yourself later, that is an option available to you.
Some of the topics this panel will be covering includes, but is not limited to, coming out experiences, mental health, unsafe environments, rejection, trauma, and a commentary on potential violence.
if at any point during our event you feel like taking a break or needing to leave, by all means, please do so. We understand that these are not always easy topics to talk about, so if need be, we also have this list of potential resources that are available to you. Number one, the Trevor Project, available to all LGBTQ plus / queer youth under 25 for free, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their trained counselors are there to support you via text, online chat, or by phone at 488-7386. We also have the Trans Lifeline, available to trans asterisk people of all ages for free, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their peer support operators are all trans asterisk identified and are there to support you by phone at 877-565-8860. There's also the LGBT National Hotline, available to all LGBTQ plus / queer youth, adults, and seniors for free. Their peer support operators are there for you by phone at 888-843-4564. For more information regarding hours of operation, please check out their website. And last but not least, we have the Crisis Text Line, available to all people for free, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their trained crisis counselors are there to support you via Facebook Messenger or by text at 741-741. Please do keep in mind that this is not an LGBTQ plus / queer organization. Now I'm going to pass it over to Chriselle.
Thank you, Juan. Now, before we get started, I wanted to give you all some norms and guidelines as we're moving into this panel space. And these are going to be for you all as audience members to take into account, as well as our panelists as they're going to be sharing alongside each other. Norm number one, respect each other. Please respect everyone's diversity, intersectionality, and humanity. Norm number two, be present and be open. Actively listen to the person that is sharing and open your mind up and your heart up to new ideas, perspectives, and interests. Number three, assume good intentions. If someone has said anything that has hurt you, please ask for clarification before assuming they had bad intentions. Number four, take responsibility for impact. If you unintentionally cause any sort of harm, say any sort of harm, then please apologize and just move forward. Number five, speak using I statements, starting your statements off with I, me, my experience, etc. We don't want to assume for a whole community. These are experiences that are just for the specific people that are speaking. Six, use some space and create some space. Be mindful of the space that you're using and give others a chance to share, but also please take the space as well because we want to hear from everyone tonight. And last but not least, we want to promise you a brave space. We can't promise you a safe space due to the way that people may react to things that are heard tonight, but we can we can provide a brave space, giving you the space to be as vulnerable as you would like to tonight. And I'm passing it back to Juan to introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Krista. So first up, we have Holly. We're going to welcome a few other incredible members of our LGBTQ plus community, but our first panelist is Holly. Holly uses she, her pronouns, and she mentions, I moved from the South Bay to Seattle, Washington at the end of last year to be closer to my family in the Pacific Northwest. I miss Southern California every day, and I'm also incredibly happy with the little life I'm building here in Seattle. I work at UW Medical Center and fill my free time with cooking and baking, watching Schitt's Creek, and spending as much time outside as possible. I'm grateful for my queer community and loving, supportive family. I use she, her pronouns, and I identify as queer or a lesbian.
Next up on our panel is Matthew. Matthew uses the they them pronouns, and they were raised in a religious Asian household in Orange County, California. Matthew observed queer culture from the closet for most of their life. After trying out a cisgender lifestyle for many years, they were inspired by non binary characters on shows like Carmilla and Degrassi to break the mold on gender roles. Matthew has found purpose in the progressive movement in the progressive movement and is an advocate for the queer community, women, people of color, and mental health awareness.
All right, moving on. Next up, we have Edwin. Edwin uses he, they pronouns, and they mentioned, my name is Edwin Aceves, my pronouns are he, they, and I've been volunteering at the South Bay LGBTQ Center for 3 years and have served on the board for 2. I am very proud to be queer and Chicanx, and I am committed to being an activist for my community. I studied art, so I could try to make as much of it as I can, but this year my passion has shifted to collecting plants. Welcome, Edwin.
Next up, we have Jamin. Jamin uses he, him pronouns. Jamin is a lecturer of history, critical race, and ethnic studies at the University of California, Merced. He works primarily in media studies and analyzes the ways Taiwan's contested sovereignty is mediated through popular culture. Outside of work, he's a bad drag queen and avid tabletop board game player. He identifies as queer and gray ace. Welcome, Jamin.
Next up is Alicia. Alicia uses she, her pronouns. She mentions, my favorite music is indie and pop punk, and a few of my favorite books are White Oleander by Jen Fitch, Love Medicine by Louise Erdrich, and Slow Lighting by Eduardo C. Corral. I grew up in rural Northern California in a small town of 1,059 people, and I have 14 siblings. I recently moved back to California after completing a service year with AmeriCorps and CCC, where I served in disaster relief in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., and Ponce, Puerto Rico. My hometown is in Lake County, California. I have a BA of anthropology from UC Merced. I am 23 years old and I identify as queer womanx of color. Welcome, Alicia. All right, and we will now be moving on to our actual panel questions. If I could please have all of our panelists turn on their cameras, that would be great. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. Really excited to get started. So the first question that we're going to be asking will be asked to all of our panelists. So the first person that we're going to go with is Holly. If you could share a fun fact about yourself, what would that fun fact be?
A fun fact. I think 2 things. 1, I'm obsessed with dachshunds, and 2, I'm obsessed with sugar cookies. And today I made dachshund sugar cookies.
Really cool. Matthew, if you could share a fun fact about yourself, what would that fun fact be?
I am an avid collector of audiobooks. I love audiobooks, and one of my part of my coming out journey was listening to queer fiction and really identifying with the characters.
Thank you, Matthew. Next up, Edwin, a fun fact.
My fun fact is I wore only the color blue for like 5 years straight, so it was a phase.
Jamin.
I used to live, I guess as a fun fact, I used to live on a biological reservation with capuchin monkeys for a year. So that was an interesting experience.
Alicia.
Hi, yes, my name is Alicia. My fun fact is that I have like more than like 11 or 12 tattoos. I'm like heavily tattooed.
Cool. Thank you so much. Chriselle.
And thank you all. Those fun facts are very fun. I have another question for all five of you. We can start off with Holly again, but this is a more universal question. What does coming out mean to you? And we'll start off with Holly.
Okay. Coming out means a lot of different things, but I think sort of two things specifically. For me, coming out was acknowledging to myself who I was. And then I think the more sort of like universal idea or concept of it, which is acknowledging your identity or my identity to the world around me, to my friends, family, and just to people, to strangers.
Thank you. And Matthew.
I guess coming out could be like my coming out experience as identifying as non-binary and like making those steps to like socially transition both to my friends and family and to like coworkers and like out just like going out into the world, define gender roles. And when I think about coming out to like strangers, I think most of the times I tell people my pronouns are they, them. People can tell I'm gender nonconforming, and most people don't understand what non-binary means. So it's like a little explanation of and try to like figure out what people know and a little education.
Thank you, Matthew. Edwin.
For me, coming out is just, something you do your entire life, but it's really, for me, was choosing to be myself and just my authentic self.
Love that. And Jaina.
Yeah, I think coming out for me was a process of kind of reinventing yourself too. Where before coming out, there was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of rules that I followed that I made up in my own head. And I think, years and years afterwards is just increasingly finding new ways to sort of find out who you are.
Radical. And Alicia.
I feel as though coming out is different for every individual, but for me as well, it was more acknowledging my own identity, especially growing up in a very conservative household. And then moving away for college, like I still struggled with my identity as like a queer individual. So just coming out is just acknowledging that fact.
Thank you all so much. Yeah, coming out is very different for everybody, and it's nice to hear the different viewpoints from all of you. So thank you. And back to you, Juan.
Thank you, Trista. And thank you, everyone. This next question is directed towards Edwin. Edwin, how have you navigated your identity in queer and Chicanx spaces? What role has your intersectionality played in your coming out process or your coming out journey?
So I identify as Chicanx. I've came to the United States when I was a few months old, and I've been here my whole life. So I am an immigrant, and as many people know, Mexican culture has a lot of very strict gender roles. And I think those gender roles were basically the biggest part of, at home we had the Mexicans like that. So I had two different cultures basically telling me that being queer was wrong. And then even today, when I came out a long time ago, and is when I face the most rejection still. I've heard people say, my community is the queer community, not the Latinx community. And I've always been both equally. And that was a very, very weird thing to hear. But as
It's okay. I think Edwin is having some issues with his internet, so we'll just wait until he comes back. I guess I'll give it back to you, Chriselle.
Hopefully, we'll get everyone back soon. But I have a question. It's a free for all question. Whoever would like to answer. What role has your general intersectionality played in your coming out experience? So very similar to Edwin's question.
I also want to acknowledge that silence is okay. If there's some time in between, totally fine. Okay, it gives everybody a moment to really think about their answer.
Yeah, I think so. I guess for me, for this question, I think I earlier so I came out relatively young. I came out when I was like 14, so super young for sort of the area that I was in. And I think initially I had sort of viewed my queerness as kind of my major lens of looking at social hierarchy in my life. And then over time, that's shifted pretty radically towards race for me being a really defining kind of way that I view my life and my life experiences. So I think in terms of kind of like the intersectionality of coming out, I think especially when I was younger, coming out and entering this sort of queer space and being really excited about it. And then unfortunately, sometimes running into a wall where it's like, some of these spaces are not very friendly to, to Asian Americans, or some of these spaces are maybe not the most inclusive race-wise. I think for me, that was a matter of trying to find little subsets within the queer community of where can I fit in, where can I not feel sort of like dehumanized or in some other way stigmatized within the community.
Yeah, I think for me, I grew up in Orange County in California. It's pretty conservative. I also grew up like as Chinese and as Christian. So it was a really hard for the intersectionality growing up in conservative culture because I really didn't have a lot of progressive friends in my life. So there was not advocacy for the queer community. And just growing up with like that being queer was a sin or that you would go to hell and things like that, it was hard just trying to figure out like what was right and what's wrong. And it took a really long time to like explore, and it was really scary to like meet another queer person or to associate myself with other people. But I'm really glad I did, and just learning that like people are beautiful, and there's so many different types of people out there, and you gotta try it out, and you gotta figure out what works for you.
Thank you to Jamin and Matthew for answering that question. If anyone else wants to hop in, go for it. But I also want to give Edwin back some space to finish answering up his question. Welcome back.
Hi, sorry about that. Yeah, I caught the last bits of what y'all just said, and I do relate to that a lot. But what I kind of wanted to say was that one of the strangest things for me being an immigrant and being Chicanx is having this idea of there's this kind of coming out timeline that the USA has. And it's like there's one very acceptable timeline where you come out as a kid or a teenager, your parents accept you, and that would be the only. But that timeline's really skewed for when you have a different. And what I needed, a strong sense of independence and knowing that I would be okay on my own to make my choice to come out finally. But I think that comparing my culture and the culture of queer people in the U.S. And when those two things didn't match, I think that caused me a lot of stress. But growing up and meeting more Chicanx people that are queer, I really found a spot and a place that I feel really at home. And I think that's a huge improvement from me from 10 years ago.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll pass it back to Juan.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is directed to Jamin. Jamin, you mentioned being a drag queen that identifies as queer and great ace. How have you navigated coming out in both your professional and personal spaces? And what role has being a drag queen played in your coming out journey?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I came out really young. I think I started doing drag just a couple of years ago, but it was part of this transition where I think I was, again, kind of rediscovering new parts of my queerness that I didn't necessarily know about in the beginning. I was really lucky to have, a very supportive family, and a very supportive sort of home life. My mom follows 3 Instagram accounts, and it's my sister, me, and my drag account. So I've always been really lucky to sort of have that support. But I think for what actually got me into drag, I guess to connect it to the sort of professional and personal angle is drag was something that I was very interested in for a long time, but it was always as a hypothetical that will never happen. It was always just like, well, like, yeah, this is a cool thing that I'm really into, and let's just like daydream about it. And then later it was, well, let's just buy one wig, and then just for no reason, we'll just like have it somewhere in the house, and that's it. And really, I think it was teaching at UC Merced specifically, and seeing like young people that are or people that were younger than I am. I make myself sound like I'm super old. Seeing people that were younger than I am like feel like being so free, being so open to experimenting with their gender expression. I think it really pushed me to say, like, I am however many years older than these people. Like, what is stopping me? Like, what is actually stopping me from saying, like, okay, I can sort of just make this jump that I've already clearly been gesturing towards for a while. So I think that sort of professional setting like somehow ended up contributing to this new level of coming out.
Thank you, Jamin. That was wonderful. Chriselle, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Jamin. I have another free-for-all question for all of you. Do you remember the first time that you were in an LGBTQ plus or queer space after coming out? After coming out to yourself and your loved ones, and how did you feel being in that space with your new identity?
I can answer this one. However, I do have to say, like beforehand, it's not the most positive experience. I came out when I was like 17 or 18, and I was moving to college, UC Merced. And I remember going to Bobcat Day, and I remember seeing the Lambda Alliance, the LGBT organization on that campus. And I identify with like my gender at birth. I'm cisgender, I'm female, and I am very feminine presenting. And I remember going to this table and I'm like, oh, I want to know more information about your organization. And they're like, are you gay? And I was like, yes, I'm gay. Like, I believe I'm a lesbian at this moment. I'm like still questioning. And this individual like told me, she was like, you're not gay. You don't look gay. And that moment like really rubbed me wrong, because like I don't really have a supporting family about my identity, and then only to like receive rejection from the LGBT community also was like, ow. But I still joined the organization and later became like an officer. And I always try to make individuals comfortable, because I never wanted anyone to receive the same like reaction like I did.
Yeah, it can be difficult at times when you're trying to ease into a new space where you are supposed to be accepted and loved, and then to be received with backlash. I'm so sorry about that. That can happen to me too at one point when I was coming out. So I feel you there. I will leave the space open a little more for anyone else who would like to answer the question before I move it back over to Juan. All right, back to you.
Thank you, Chriselle, and thank you so much for sharing, Alicia. And sorry about that experience. But I'm glad that you were part of Lambda Alliance afterwards. The next question is directed to Holly. Holly, you mentioned coming from a very supportive family. What was it like initially coming out as a queer and lesbian person to your loved ones?
They're very loving and accepting now. I think that there was, I think for my parents, there was definitely this moment of like, oh God, it's okay to be queer or gay, but when it's your daughter, it's a little bit different. um, and so there was like this kind of, I think there was a period of time where it was a little bit awkward. I also came out, I don't necessarily want to say I came out late. I came out when I was like 27, at the point where I was like actually um, dating a woman at age 27. And so I think that there was early on this idea of like, well, but like you've dated men forever. So like, why now? Like, what's going on? What does this actually mean? Um, but as far as like my extended family, my siblings, I have two sisters. Um, Overall, they're overwhelmingly supportive at this point. But I definitely thought, um, like I very like casually called my mom one day and was like, "Oh, by the way, like I'm dating this person that you thought was just my friend." And I was just expecting it to be like, I was living in LA and I thought it would just be this like automatic thing, where, my parents would just be like, okay, awesome. Like, do you want to bring her home or something? But it was a little bit rockier, I think, at the beginning, and definitely more awkward for me. I'm really fortunate to have other out queer family members who came before me, and so they certainly have made it um, a lot easier for me to see myself as an out person in my family, and I think probably a lot easier for my parents and other family members to be able to recognize the importance of being supportive and loving, even when it is a bit of a shock, so to speak.
Thank you so much for sharing, Holly. Appreciate it. Chriselle, pass it back on to you.
Thank you again, Holly. So I've got another question for all of you. Um, as it's been said, and as we all know, coming out's not always a one-time thing. In saying that, there have been some negative and some positive experiences you've had coming out, and so I wanted to ask on the positive side, what's been one of the most positive experiences you've had coming out so far?
I just want to quickly say, for me, I think being at Pride actually, like, as there are many complicated feelings that I have toward Pride, and I think probably a lot of people share those. Um, but I think the greatest part is that you don't have to come out, that it's like this space where like the default is that there is no default and that there isn't just this binary like you're either this or you're this and you're nothing in between. And so it's great to just be able to like, whether it's like walking into like a bar or whatever that's like having a pride celebration, or just like walking down the street and feeling that vibe of like, it doesn't matter, I don't have to actually explicitly say to someone, oh, actually I'm not straight, because that's constant, especially like Alicia was saying, like being a very femme presenting woman. It's like you're constantly having to remind, or I'm constantly having to remind people of like, actually, I'm not what you're assuming about me. So being at Pride is great because it's like, oh no, like no one's really making assumptions, and we all are free to explain our identity, and that's like incredible. But there's no explaining it because you were misinterpreted, or because the assumption is like so far off base of how like I actually view myself or identify.
I guess this isn't maybe a typical sort of coming out sort of situation, in that I wasn't like actively planning on coming out during this, but occasionally when I'm teaching, I get to teach queer theory, or I get to teach a queer color theory, and I in the past few years have started doing that lesson in drag, to just kind of take queer sort of queer theory out of the textbook and just like into the classroom. And I don't normally like hide my queerness generally, but I don't usually like go out of my way to say it in class. But that's always a fun experience when you just walk in like the most gaudy outfit that you can find, and then you just sort of see students' reactions to that, and it's usually a really fun class. So I think that's kind of been a positive experience for me of a pseudo coming out. That's related to sort of my work.
Lovely. Thank you, Jamin. Thank you, Holly, for that, and for your answers and your honesty. And I'm gonna pass it back to Juan for our next question.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you for Holly and Jamin. Um, next question is for Matthew. Matthew, you mentioned growing up in a religious Asian household. How did you navigate this as a non-binary person, and what was coming out like for you?
Yeah, thanks, Juan. For me, growing up, I think I would have said I was trans. I think I told a couple of my friends in high school I was transgender, or that's the word I used. But I didn't really do a lot about it, and I didn't really know what non-binary meant because it's really like a new word to me. And for me, that was really helpful. And just saying, hey, why does wearing a dress make you a girl, or why are there gender roles? Like, these are pieces of cloth. Like, women can be anything, men can be anyone. And I think non-binary just really breaks the mold. I'm just like, hey, I can do what I want and present the way I want and like really be me. And I think growing up in like an Asian and Christian household, I think it was hard because there's like a lot of shame about trying to like be a good kid to my parents. Like, I want to respect my parents and like do what I was taught to do. And as a Christian, like wanting to live up to these values. And there's a lot of shame and a lot of like mental health struggles that I had to go through that that therapy really helped. I think I found some great therapists at the LGBT Center, which really helped me just like regain my confidence and just like be able to explore in a non-judgmental way to be myself. And I think in terms of religion, I think I knew that God was supposed to be love. Like, I was supposed to, love your neighbor as yourself. But it took me a really hard time to find like an acceptive religious community. And there are progressive churches out there that like are totally supportive and have tons of gay people and queer people in them. But I didn't know they existed. And it took a really long time to find a supportive religious community. And that was hard.
Thank you, Matthew, for sharing. I'll pass it back to Trisha.
Yes, thanks, Matthew. I also grew up in a religious household, so and like fully Christian. I was that kid, so I'm feeling what you're putting down. So thank you for that. Um, Another question for y'all. Were there any LGBTQ plus / queer role models in your personal life or in the media that helped you um, or brought you any kind of joy or comforting before, during, or after your coming out journey?
I can answer this one. I didn't really have any huge role models growing up, but um, when I discovered Janelle Monáe a long time ago, like her music really changed my perspective on things. The first album I ever listened to was The Arc Android, and she has this one song that's called Cold War. And in that song, she says, "I was made to believe there's something wrong with me." And when I heard that, it flipped everything around. Like my entire like perspective on what gay means, what people's reaction to gay means, what loving myself, like the few words changed a lot for me. So when she came out as Pan recently, that helped out a lot because her music meant so much to me and my queer journey that when she was queer also, I just felt really happy about that. And then when she came out with the song Queen, when she says, um, even if it makes others uncomfortable, I will still love who I am. That gave me so much strength. And actually, when I heard that song is when I decided to become a volunteer at the center. So I'm going to throw Janelle Monáe into this conversation for sure.
All right, I'll leave this question open for a little longer before I toss it back over to Juan. All right, take away Juan.
Thank you, Edwin, and thank you, Crystal. Next question is for Alicia. Alicia, you mentioned having 14 siblings and growing up in a small rural town with a population of 1,059 people. How was coming out as a multicultural, bisexual, queer woman of color like for you?
was a hot mess. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, to this day, I don't think a lot of people in my town really know, even though I'm not like trying to hide it because I'm very open about it when people ask me or on social media. But like, I don't actively like go knock on my neighbor's house and like, hey, I'm gay. Like, no, that doesn't happen. I'll probably get shot. Like, no joke. It's like really super rural. Um, but I was like raised in a single parent household. And at this time, I only knew I had 7 siblings that existed at this point in my life. Um, and my siblings have always been very accepting of me. They don't really care, and I think it's because of like our generation and our age. However, my mom and like my grandmother are religious and they have their own beliefs, and I love them and I respect them. However, I don't agree with them majority of the time. And it's kind of like don't ask, don't tell. They know that I am queer, but like they don't ask me about it, and I don't tell them anything about it. Like they see my social media posts. They like hear me talk about like old partners or like current partners. So they have the idea. And like I even told my mom, I was like, in college, I won Queens of the Castro scholarship. I was like, hey mom, like, don't be surprised if you hear I won a scholarship for being gay. And like, she's like, what? She's like, for being a girl? And I was like, no, for being gay. And she's like, oh. And then she just like never talked about it again. Um, and then currently with my other siblings, so I, weird story, I found my biological dad on 23andMe 2 months ago. And on that side, I have 7 more siblings. And I recently had to go through the process of telling them, like, oh, yeah, I'm also gay. And they're Mexican, and they came here. My dad came here in like 1980. So all of his children are like first generation Mexican Americans. And my siblings have been very accepting about that so far. They haven't really said anything because apparently I'm not the first queer person in the family. Um, and I think my dad just doesn't know what to say about it. He just says like cool and then like nods his head, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like I can do this. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Alicia. Really appreciate it. And Crystal, I'll send it back to you.
Awesome. Our time's coming to more of a close, so we only have a couple more questions left for you all. But this one is one I wanted to ask. When did you realize or feel that it was time to come out? And you can interpret that in whatever way you feel fit, whether that's coming out to yourself, coming out to your family. We want to keep this question open for y'all. So when did you realize that it was the right time for you to come out?
I could go first if no one wants to go. When I started coming out, I came out very slowly. I told very few people. I told more and more people as time went on, and eventually, I spent more time being out than being closeted. And I'd have to enter these interactions with family or work or school where I had to put myself back in the closet, and that time became less and less as time went on. But when I did it, it just felt so exhausting, and I was just really tired of going back and forth, telling I can't tell you who I had lunch with, stuff like that. So um, when I had more time in my life being out than time in the closet, I kind of felt like if I really want to have the same relationship with everyone in my life, then I need to be the same person with everyone in my life. And that's kind of when I decided to make it something that make my authentic self available for everyone, and not just specific people.
I can share a little bit. I came out pretty late, I think like when I was about 30 or so. So I already had a full-time job. I was still living with my parents at the time to save money. And I feel like I was a part of a lot of these systems where, you know, I was supposed to be cis, like I was supposed to be Christian, and like I had to like be a certain way at work to present a certain way. And I just like always knew that like I wanted to try, I wanted to meet more queer people and like experiment or just like be my authentic self. But it was really scary. And I think coming out was just a way to like be me and just like not have to hide, not like not have to hide my like internet browser history or like what my interests are, like be able to like things on my YouTube channel or Facebook without like someone questioning or finding out that I'm queer or gay or whatever. And that was just really great to like take that step and just try and start living and start instead of trying to like fit myself into these boxes that society has constructed, just like to do something to be who I can be.
Awesome. Thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Matthew. Um, we have one final question. I'll shoot it over to Juan for that, but this will be the last question rounding out our night. So, Juan.
Thank you. Okay, so everyone, feel free to chime in whenever you want. The last question is acknowledging that there are some people in situations where they cannot openly come out to the individuals in their life due to rejection, a negative change in their life, or other. What thoughts of love, affirmation, or solidarity can you share with them?
I'll say something. I acknowledging that like not being able to publicly or openly be out is like it's a pain and it's a trauma in itself. So certainly never to downplay that. But I think for me, one of the most important things that I think about a lot is that my identity doesn't change depending on how many people know it, that I'm always myself. And even when I do have to be kind of closeted or at least like a little bit quieter about who I am, um, that doesn't have to change the way I feel about myself. And it certainly doesn't have to change anything about who I am and what my identity actually is, because that's something that only I get to have control over. So that's like this tiny little piece of solace, I think, is knowing that like inside you're always the same and you're always perfect and you're always enough. And also sometimes it's not safe to be you on the outside, and those two things can exist simultaneously.
If I could give one piece of advice, if it's hard for you to come out, if it's not safe, is if you can find a supportive community, that helps a lot. If you can find a friend that you can talk to, or there's a lot of online communities and there's a lot of Zoom groups now because of COVID that you can join your local LGBT center or even a center from another state. Find a group of people who can just hear your story that you can talk to. And I think that helps a lot. Also, therapy and mental health counseling. If you want to speak to a professional, I know the LGBT centers they have sliding scales, and a lot of times you don't even have to pay. So see someone who can be supportive for you and can be on your side.
I guess if I had any advice, it'd be that sort of coming out is like there's no, and other people have already alluded to this, but there's no sort of like one size fits all timeline for anyone's coming out process. I think a lot of times people feel a lot of pressure, especially if they're sort of in environments that maybe it's not 100% safe right now to come out. That they're doing sort of themselves a disservice if they don't come out or if they don't follow the sort of timeline. I don't think like any of us here that are talking have the same exact coming out timeline or time process, and what you're sort of processing about yourself is wholly your kind of story, and there's nothing wrong with when or where or who you end up deciding to come out to, even if that's yourself, even if it takes yourself a while. to feel comfortable with it.
I'll leave the space open for a little while longer, and then I'll pass it back to yourself.
Like everyone has given great advice. I don't know how to top any of y'all, but I would just always have like the reminder that no matter what, like you're valid, and your emotions and your feelings are all valid. And even though it might be going through a hard time, or you can't come out at this moment, or you don't know what to do, that's okay because there isn't a timeline, and you are loved even if you're not out. And just keep on going, honestly.
Okay. Thank you so much for everyone who shared. Really appreciate it. And thank you for everyone for being on this panel. I'm going to go ahead and give it back to Grisel to end us off for the night.
Awesome. Yes, again, thank you so much for joining us. We really had I had a fun time tonight and getting to hear all of you and your stories, and your coming out journeys. And I'm definitely sure that those who were listening got a lot out of it as well. So thank you for giving us an hour of your Sunday night to help out our community and support our community. If I can just, where am I? I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you so much again, and to everyone who's watching either on YouTube or currently live right now. Thank you all as well. I just want to let you all know again. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Our handles are South Bay LGBTQ. My apologies, and or Spectral LGBTQ. And you can follow us, or if you have any other questions or need anything else, you can reach out to us there. Again, thank you all. Thank you all to our panelists for joining us. Huge virtual applause to all of you. And last but not least, for everyone out there, please don't forget that our colors are shining a lot brighter today and tonight than they ever have, because we're standing together in love and solidarity on this National Coming Out Day 2020 in this weird time of Zoom and a pandemic. So thank you all for coming, and I'm glad that we can still do this even though everything's different. But take care, everyone. Have a wonderful night, and stay strong.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.